Hey guys, this is David here. This is my first video. I just saw Star Wars: The Force Awakens yesterday, and I've had about a whole day to kind of like let it sink in and think about it. And this is just really going to be my thoughts and my like kind of more the grievance and my problems with the movie rather than my likes. Now, first of all, let me get this right off the back. It's a great movie. It's a really good movie. It's not amazing, and I did have problems with it. That being said, everyone should see this. This video is not made to deter anybody from this like enjoyable experience because everyone needs to see this movie. It's fantastic. It's a great time and everybody's gonna like it. It's just that there's several things that annoyed me and might annoy a lot of other people, and I just kind of want to discuss that and kind of bring up some of the topics that some people probably disliked about the movie. So let me say, so of course spoilers. I'm going to put that in the title and everything, but I went into this movie really excited, just like everybody else. I went 7 o'clock Thursday night, first showing, and I went in with the expectations to hopefully see a new trilogy, the start of a new trilogy, one that would get me feeling like I did when I first saw the originals, to be honest, right? Now, this movie, no doubt, better than the prequels, no worries there. And, I would say better than episode 6, to be honest. Not as good as episode 4 and 5, of course. Yeah, just not there yet. But I think it really can. Maybe the ones after this one could, episodes 8 and 9 could kind of reach that episode 4 and 5 level. It's possible. Now, if you haven't seen the movie, some of this you won't understand yet. Hopefully you're seeing this after you've seen the movie, or you just really don't care about the plot, which you should see it. All right. So let me just kind of go into my first major problems with the film. So basically, the First Order creates this new weapon, right? Star Killer base, basically, right? And it's a super weapon. It's one that takes the energy from the sun and just blasts it out. It literally just blows up planets, multiple of them at a time, which you see in the film. Now, this had a lot of hype and kind of served as the main the main problem and force that the resistance was fighting against. Because after the beginning of the movie, they blow up several like of the Republic planets, and that that gets the resistance like, oh no, we got to fight back now. So what kind of problem I had with it is with the film is that they built up this huge, large, base that has this enormous weapon. And as you see, yeah, we had the Death Star in episodes 4 and 6. And, even some people were kind of annoyed, like, episode 6, did you really need to do a Death Star again? Okay, but then now they're doing it again. And yeah, of course, it's bigger and everything, right? And it's not my problem that they had this super weapon. My problem is that they're going to build the super thing and they're just going to waste it, pretty much. So how does it get destroyed? It gets destroyed in another trench run. It gets destroyed very quickly. Now, yeah, Han Solo, Chewbacca, everybody goes in to destroy the shields, right? But you never really feel that kind of tension. Episode 4, when Luke is going down through the trench run and is, gonna fire the proton torpedoes inside and destroy the Death Star, you get such a sense of tensions. You feel like, is it possible that he may not achieve this? And then when Obi-Wan talks to him and he starts using he turns off his radar and uses the Force, you really just feel the moment. It's so tense. You're on the edge of your seat. You're just like, is this really gonna happen? Is he gonna do it? And it's just such a powerful scene and one of the best scenes in that movie. One of the best scenes in the saga, in my opinion. And what you get here is that now we have this new weapon that's 10 times as big as the Death Star, but they still end up destroying it like that. Yeah, they go in and they destroy shields. So of course, Chewbacca lays some explosives which make a chain reaction and blow up a bunch of things that, in turns destroys the shields. Okay, whatever, right? I guess, they had to do something like that, destroy the shields, whatever. But then it just takes the Resistance maybe, a few minutes of screen time after, TIE fighters are flying by, right? But after that, it just takes Poe, right? And maybe like just a few seconds to run in, right? And just to shoot proton speeders, just, everywhere, right? And they just kind of blow it up, and you never had any kind of tension. You never really thought that, like, wow, they're not going to blow it up. In the matter of like minutes, you're like, oh, there goes the big weapon. Could that have been a big problem for the whole series? Yeah, that would have been great. But then in the first movie, they just kind of casually blow it up. They're like, yeah, woohoo, right? But they're not like, they never seemed like, oh no, we're gonna lose. Like, there was no tension. It was so quick, and it was such a waste of this that it was pointless to even have it, in my opinion. It was just kind of like there, and that like this thing's humongous, and it had all this effort, and for this huge machine that basically gets this huge weapon that they put so much effort into to destroy, to create, and everything like that. It seems stupid that there wasn't better defenses, or that it really took a few of the Resistance fighters to destroy it, and it just seems like a waste of potential and just a really stupid idea, in my opinion. That's just my honest opinion, what I feel. Now, coming from that, what hops on is that inside the base, it really kind of felt empty. Like, yeah, you see stormtroopers running around, yeah, but the whole time, it never seems like our heroes, right, which, are Finn, John Boyega, and, Rey, and Han Solo and Chewbacca, right? They're the ones infiltrating, right? Rey's on her own doing her own thing, right? Because she's escaping, actually. But then the other three, you never really feel nervous, right? Yeah, a few scenes like, oh no, there's some stormtroopers, but they literally just blast their way through, sneak around. This seems like a huge place that just feels empty. You see a few stormtroopers, they kill them, and they're just kind of lying on the ground, no alarms going off. They just go through it, they destroy the base, and then, it's just kind of like, what? Yeah, I know Chewbacca rages, he blows up everything, makes sense, but you never feel tension, you never feel like it's not going to happen, and honestly, it just seems way, way too easy. Episode 4, we're getting the Rogue movie next year, and that's going to show how hard it was just to get these plans. Yet here, they blow up some things, and then they blow up, the weapon. And I know John Boyega or Finn, Finn was, in the base, and he kind of knew where, the important areas were. But even with that, it shouldn't have been that easy, and it should have been heavier, like much heavier defended. And it was just a waste of potential for something that could really just span the series of movies. And on top of that, when the planets actually did get destroyed, right, 5 of them, or 4, I believe, right, you don't really feel the repercussions. Of course, people are like, oh no, planets got destroyed. But you never are like, they're never like grieving or anything, or like, oh no, we just, these huge planets got destroyed. Alderaan getting destroyed, like, that was a big deal. But then take that times 4. Like, you're not gonna, like, care that much. Yeah, of course they're like, oh no, we gotta stop this. But they're never, like, that fearful. On top of that, they never seem to try to evacuate. Like, at least the Resistance evacuate their planet when, when they realize that, the thing's gonna get fired at them. I can see maybe why they wouldn't, they want to stay there and fight, but still, there should have been, there seems like if they had, at least a day's notice, or, they should have tried something. I don't know. Hopping off of that, the problem I had with the Resistance now is, after all these years, the Resistance has built and everything like that. And it's gotten stronger and stronger, apparently, right? And, they're on equal footing with the First Order, they're stronger in the First Order, whatever. Why is the Resistance made up of like 30 people? Literally, you watch the movie and you see the Resistance, and yeah, it's cool and everything, but they have a Yavin 4 like base, right? Which is some of the very early stages of the base, but it doesn't even look as nice or that complex. it really feels like there's 30 people maybe, and then there's like 10 X-wings, no Y-wings. I didn't see any Y-wings in the movie. No A-wings. It just seems like so little for like this army that's been fighting for apparently 30 years after Return of the Jedi. Like, you would think that it'd be a huge force. The First Order, you look at them, and you're like, wow, that's an army. But here you just see like a few resistance fighters, and they didn't lose. They lost a few men, but I don't know. It just seems a little silly to me on that point. But okay, so now I want to move on to my next point, which is talking about kind of the Jedis. Now, Rey becoming a Jedi, the red herring of Finn being the actual Jedi in the trailers and everything. I thought that was great. Midway in the movie, you kind of realize like, oh, Rey's gonna become a Jedi, understandable, but they did that really well. She slowly gets a few powers, does a few Jedi mind tricks. It was funny, it was cool, everything. But here's the thing, she's inexperienced as a Jedi, right? Luke, trained a little bit, right? Learned some things, in the first movies, right? Even after quite a bit of training on Dagobah, right? He gets destroyed by Darth Vader in Cloud City in Episode 5. That's just how it is. He doesn't, he isn't, he's cocky and he thinks he's ready. But even with all that training, he still just gets demolished by Darth Vader. It's not till, Return of the Jedi where, he does beat Vader. But in here, you take Kylo Ren. Now, Kylo Ren is supposed to be this prodigy. Maybe, not as strong as Darth Vader, okay. But, and he's being tricked by, Snoke and everything, right? As, Harrison Ford says, or Han Solo says. And you really think that he's this prodigy, right? He's a leader. People, they're afraid of him. They kind of look up to him. He shows a few of his force abilities, right? He stops a bullet, or a blaster attack, right? Midway, and he just kind of leaves it there. And he leaves it there with just his mind. After holding out his hand initially and stopping it, then he just kind of thinks, and he just leaves it there until he wants it to fire again, which is ridiculous, right? You haven't seen that kind of like force, in many of the movies, something like to that extreme. He's able to mind, he's able to get things from your mind, kind of read your mind and look past that, even on the really strongest willed people. And that's really impressive. He has this great, this really cool looking lightsaber, the saber blade, right? That, you really think that he's going to be this really strong person. And then you learn that, he's Darth Vader's, grandson. He's Han and Leia's kid, and you're just expecting him to be this amazing fighter. Now, you go into the final battle, right? Finn has the lightsaber, and Finn has no force powers. Does he really know how to use a lightsaber? Not really, right? He just thinks of it as a sword. Everything he did back when he was at the bar, kind of where it got destroyed and the Empire was invading, and he first uses the lightsaber to fight. It was really cool. He runs up to a guy, just stabs him, right? Because that's how he knows how to use a weapon. He's just a soldier. And, he does a few other cool things, and he literally is just whacking away because he has no style or no training in this. So when he goes and fights Kylo Ren, I'm like, okay, he should get destroyed. He should just immediately lose, right? So he goes in, but he puts up a decent enough fight, right? Yeah, of course he loses. He has to lose. He has no training in this. But part of the problem was, I was thinking the whole time, why doesn't, Kylo Ren just use a little bit of force? A force push would stop him because he's not force sensitive. He doesn't have the ability to stop him. Of course, okay, Finn is whacking away, and maybe he's getting distracted, can't use the force, but eventually he defeats him. Okay, I don't think Kylo Ren should have had as hard of a time with Finn as he did, but he did. But then here's where a problem comes up. Rey, with even less experience than Finn, hasn't even used the lightsaber. She touched it once and freaked out, right? It's cool that she's able to use the force and, pull it in. Okay, maybe a little early for her to learn that because, that was a big deal for Luke. And that was like in episode 5 when, he was attacked by the Wampa. But here, she takes the lightsaber, and you can see that she really doesn't. She shouldn't know how to really use it other than a weapon. And yeah, she seems like a very skilled fighter, right? But versus somebody who is trained by Luke, Kylo Ren, somebody who's really intact with the Force, a military leader, or at least like one of the strongest soldiers, right? He he loses to Rey. Period. That's that's dumb. That's just silly. I mean, I know he was hurt. I know people will argue, be like, yeah, he had a wound and everything. Finn tired him out. But even so, he he it makes no sense that he would lose that battle. And it wasn't really like, you know, Ray was even, of course she was worried and, she was running away for a while, but like, or I mean, she was, hopping around struggling, but it really didn't seem like it was that big, that like dire of her. She wasn't, all gored up and like in like out of breath and just like at her last moment trying to like hit the sword and then she got lucky, used some force. No, she just generally goes and just goes, not even I want to say berserk, but just kind of goes like, attacking and attacking, and she ends up beating him. And it's not like a drawn on fight. The fight was cool enough, and I found it really interesting that she kind of had like Anakin's kind of form, where she held the lightsaber above her head for the first hit, and she kind of had, even though she doesn't have any training, she still kind of has that form. But I found it ridiculous that they built up Kylo Ren as such a strong Jedi, but he loses to somebody with no training. And it's not even that he kind of like falls down and he's like, oh, I must escape. He completely like just gets burned up, and then he only survives because the planet blowing up caused like a divide between them. And then she was like, okay, it's not worth it, I gotta go save Finn and get out of here, right? And the fact that he got destroyed so badly is ridiculous. And in an introduction of a villain, you don't want a villain that's going to be, of course he's going to be in the other movies, right? You don't want him to start off as like weak, because that's what he seems. He seems weak. He doesn't seem strong. He's you shouldn't have, your villain lose in the first movie just to a newbie, right? This kind of situation, what I would have liked to see is Rey putting up a decent fight, maybe, right? But obviously that was kind of one-sided towards Kylo Ren, because of course he has the experience. And I want to see maybe a rescue or escape, or maybe Finn getting up, or Chewbacca coming with the Millennium Falcon, shooting a few bolts, and just escaping with them. Not that Rey completely demolishes him, because what happens now is that you gotta make him stronger for the next films in order for him to come back and defeat Rey. But that's really kind of something you want to see in as the hero. The hero is getting stronger to defeat, not the villain is getting stronger to defeat the hero, especially a hero that's just brand new and doesn't even really how to use the Force mostly. So that when that fight ended, I was just kind of like, wow, that was kind of silly. Like, yeah, it looked cool, but it just doesn't make sense, and it really just serves to like move the plot along and just to be like, oh yeah, that was cool, yay, now she knows the Force and now she's powerful, right? Like, it doesn't make sense with the characters, and I think it does a really disjustice to the movie. Yeah. Now, going off of that, now we got to talk about Kylo Ren, and he was menacing, in the beginning before he, lost, right? He was really menacing. I do like his character, I know I've heard a bit of hate, like, he's weak-willed and stuff, like he's crying. No, I like his character. I like the conflict he has between the light and the dark side. You've seen people move to the dark side from the light side, of course. Anakin, blah blah blah. It hasn't not been done before, but his conflictions are interesting. His character is interesting, and I like that he's not like at peace. He's just so full of rage, and that leads up to a few comedic moments too. His raging, right? But I like that he's just not calm, and that he has to get really angry, and that's kind of like how he goes about it. He just rages, he yells, he just like beats everything with his lightsaber. That was cool, and I like that kind of character. Now, there's still a few problems with him. He once he removes his mask, he just becomes slightly less cool, in my opinion. And it's not cool because like how he looks or anything or like his appearance. Like his appearance is fine, right? It's just that he becomes whiny almost, you know, and he he, he kind of. I'm not gonna say he gives me a Hayden Christensen kind of feel because it's not that bad, but he kind of becomes a little whiny. And then comes the scene with Han Solo, where he's with his dad. The whole time, I didn't really feel that he was that conflicted. I feel like the moment, because it was obvious the moment like Han Solo like was calling out to his son, you kind of had a feeling that Han Solo was gonna die. But when he actually talks to Han Solo, right, looking him in the eyes, and he tears up a little bit. I just feel that was like fake, and I feel like his character, of course, his character is fake and knew he was gonna kill, but like it just didn't really like do it for me. I never really felt like he was like really conflicted. He's like like he wasn't like, oh, think of the repercussions. This is my dad. I can't do this. He just really kind of felt flat there, and I feel like that was more potential for like a better scene, especially with the sun going down, it getting dark, he's getting close-ups of his face. It had a lot more potential to do something great, and it just didn't. And it's kind of a shame. And on top of that, you know, Harrison Ford's death, or Han Solo's death, most people, okay, everybody was sad. There's no doubt about that. You don't want to see this iconic character. Is it the most surprising death ever? No. Did I know before the film that he was going to die? No. But was I shocked that he died? No. You kind of had a feeling a character was going to die, and if it was going to be one, Han Solo wasn't an unlikely candidate. He's one who's getting older. You had a few kind of like, like, you kind of had a few little hints in the movie when he's saying goodbye, Leia, or like, I love you and stuff like that. That was kind of like, you kind of got the idea. You're like, okay, I think he's going to die here. And when he actually goes up to his son and stuff like that, it wasn't completely Han Solo-like, but he still keeps his personality, which I really like. Han Solo isn't like, come here, my son, right? Or like, I love you, right? No, he was like, hey, come here, right? And he was cautious, but he was like opening. And, it's a new side to Han Solo, but it wasn't like a weak side. He didn't seem too thing. He just seemed like a dad who cared for his son and really wanted to bring him home, like Leia said. But the way he dies, getting stabbed, you kind of like, for about the 4-minute conversation they had, or however long it was, you kind of knew it was coming. You're just kind of waiting for it, right? And when it happens, they show him, and you see his sadness in his face, and you kind of see Kylo Ren still kind of like tearing up a little bit. I don't think it just didn't feel completely right. I feel like it could have been handled better. I think he could have gone out in a better way, more to serve his character. And do I really have an idea for the best way to kill him? No, because he's a great character. I don't want to think about the best way to kill him. Maybe not dying in a battle, but it just and it's just, if you see the movie, yeah, you might get what I'm saying. Maybe not everyone, but it just didn't feel right the way he died. I don't think it was a really Han Solo kind of death, and for such a character, probably people's favorite character of the franchise, that it just didn't do him too much justice. And especially afterwards, everybody gets mad. I like the rage everyone gets, and they just shoot at him, especially Chewbacca, who just completely gets berserk, shoots at Kylo Ren, hits him immediately, and then shoots at like all these stormtroopers. That was really cool. But Han Solo's death still, I think, could have been handled better. Is it a huge complaint? No, but with such a character, and that he's probably the most beloved character, right? I think that just could have been handled slightly better. A little less where you kind of already knew what was going to happen. Maybe a little more shocking, and just a little bit more powerful of a scene. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, sorry if there's like a little awkward cut there. I had to pause the video for a second, and yeah. So yeah, Harrison Ford's death could have just been done better. I know he wanted to get out with the films, and I know this is probably his, that's kind of like, he saw it coming that he wanted his last film, he wanted to end the series, end on a high note. But I think it just could have been handled a little better. It wasn't terrible, just not great. Um, on top of that, another another kind of like surprise that I felt wasn't great was Kylo Ren's reveal. You know, he's a character that everybody's been theorizing for like months. Like, who is he? Is he Luke? Is he Luke's son? Is he Han's kid? And it turns out to be Han's kid, Han and Leia's. And when they reveal it, Snoke just kind of casually says like your father. And at first you're kind of like, oh, cool, but it could have been a little cooler reveal. I think that it was missed potential that they could have just had like a shocking moment where Harrison Ford is like, son, you need to stop, and then he removes his mask and something like that. I think that could have been done much better. It could have hit harder and it could have been more surprising. Um, in terms of the BB-8 stuff, I think BB-8 is a great new character. I love him. We all laughed. He was a great character and he was really interesting. It's a cute new droid, and I really think he's gonna, catch the hearts of everybody who watches it. Him kind of escaping the battle, when Poe's kind of like, running in and like, go, 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 you know, was a little like, okay, I guess, these stormtroopers don't see, the droid running away. Okay, I guess, whatever. And kind of him finding this force sensitive person, it was a little kind of like, okay. I mean, I guess it did happen in A New Hope, they found Luke, but it's kind of like Ben Kenobi's kind of like what helped kind of move that along as well. And I guess Finn kind of helped move this one along, but it just seemed a little kind of like convenient for the plot. Could have, it was well done. I enjoyed it, but kind of okay. But what I did like is kind of like how he did complete the map. What his information was. The people were like, oh, what is that? They're like, it's impartial map. And when he completed it with R2D2, that scene was really cool. And I really enjoyed the ending, them getting together, and meeting Luke. Just kind of exploring Rey. What is this? And then you see a hooded figure, and he turns around and it's Luke. Rey presents the lightsaber, and you just see the face of Luke, the awe, the shock, the surprise, just all the emotions. I think that was really well done, and I have no complaints there. I have no complaints with how it ended. I think it was a really cool scene. It gives you the chills, no doubt. Um, Sorry. Hopefully last awkward cut. Dog who's being kind of needy. Alright. But let me just continue off. Pretty much, I've described most of my major complaints. Actually, I have one more major complaint. Or more important complaint, right? My last kind of major complaint is that the lightsaber, right? Now, a lightsaber, this mystical thing, this huge important, thing that, it seems like a lot of people think is kind of like a mystery or it's just legends, right? Now, in this, cantina, they just have the lightsaber downstairs in a box. The downstairs wasn't like locked, secret, hidden. It was just like a few stairs downstairs, and it was kind of a creepy hallway, and then in a box, the main kind of box in the room. You just open it up, not locked, and it's a lightsaber. Now, you would think that, Lupita's character, that she would have this lightsaber, this ancient weapon, kind of like stowed away somewhere like deep, hard to find, somewhere locked. But no, it's just kind of there, and it's it's kind of silly. It really is. It's just kind of like, oh, there it is. And then the scene where Rey gets her flashback is really cool, and it shows. I like seeing a little bit of Kylo Ren, a little bit of Luke stuff, but it could have been. It was kind of dumb, and it was just kind of like the force along the plot, and it was kind of like, oh, here it is. Here's a lightsaber, like, especially when people have been looking for Luke for 30 years, like, or I'm not sure how long it's been, but like a long time. Yeah, but that's most of my major complaints. Let me just go into a few minor ones. This will be quick. A few minor ones were like, Leia seemed a little emotionless in the movie. I know she's a general and stuff like that, but I don't know. She didn't have she definitely changed. She's not kind of like angry or kind of like she doesn't have like attitude, which is kind of classic. And Corey, she changed and stuff like that. She grew up. She's a general now. But I felt like she could have been show a little more emotion. She gave a few hugs. She looked a little teary eyed, but she did. Carrie Fisher did a great job. Still did a great job. But it just felt like her character, just fell a little flat. A few other things. Phasma, not really a complaint, but more of just kind of like this a little like disappointment was that she she's built up as a cool character, and you see her a lot in the trailers. But then in this movie, she all she is she stands around for very few scenes, and then she asked Finn like one thing, like why did you take off your helmet? And then she gets like taunted by Finn, and then you don't even see what ends up. Now I know it's not the last for her. I know she's gonna be more in the movies, but it just kind of sets her up, and it makes me a little afraid that she's just gonna become a Boba Fett character. Now, what I mean by this is that she's wearing a nice shiny piece of armor. She looks really cool. She says a few cool lines. She's in the movie for 4 minutes. She's never used properly, and she just, I just want her to waste a cool character that has a lot of potential. Just don't want it to be, I just don't want it to be wasted. A few other things. When the planet was blowing up and the sun came in, there were like 30 seconds left. It felt a little stall-like. It felt like some of the time, I know this happens a lot of movies, but I'm just gonna say it. Like, it felt like it was like stalling. It's like, oh, a few more seconds, and then this happens and they escape and everybody's okay. And then all of the Empire, I know not all of them die, but it seems like a lot of them die. It was just kind of like, okay. And it seemed like some of the stormtroopers just like, it seems like some of them weren't concerned that much. Like, all this is happening, and they just seem a little like, oh, okay. Like, I know maybe they didn't know about it, but it just, if I was a stormtrooper, I'd feel a little bit worried. I still like, I know this is more just kind of talking about like the problems I have with the movie, because there's plenty of things I loved about the movie. I still liked, the new designs of stormtroopers, how, a little bit of Finn's backstory, and I know a lot of plot elements are going to be shown, like, later in the movies, kind of things, more about Snow, a little more about Kylo Ren, Luke, of course, a little bit more about a few other things, right? A little bit more about like how are these new First Order? Hey, Rusty, that's my dog, Rusty, right? A little bit more about kind of like the origins and how they're raising up these new people, because Kylo Ren even jokes back, he's like, hey, we can move back to clones or something, something like that, and it was kind of like, oh wow, yeah, like was he serious? No, but it was kind of like a cool little like, little saying. A few other things, a few of the scenes, nothing really dragged, but like some of the scenes with the aliens like felt like a little much when there's so much other things. What I liked about this movie, it does give you that original trilogy feel where you feel like it's an adventure. You feel like you're on an adventure and you're like following these characters and you really see these characters grow. I think they had pretty good growth, and it, it was fun. It was actiony. Some, a little bit like, they could have spent some more time in some other scenes and a little bit less in some other scenes. Again, just minor complaints. Another thing is, they had a lot of jokes, and oh man, I was surprised how funny this film was. Like, yeah, I know, you don't get that tone from the trailers at all, but oh man, this movie has some, maybe it's more fan servicey jokes, but oh man, they had some really funny jokes in this. Han Solo being like, no, 12 parsecs or something, stuff like that, or just Finn. Finn in general is just an amazing character. All these new characters are amazing. Kylo Ren, could be better, but like the two main protagonists, they're amazing characters. John Boyega is hilarious, and he does a great job acting. Occasionally, some of the jokes felt like there's a little too much, and because of those too much, some of the jokes slightly fell flat. I don't know. It wasn't a big problem. Poe, the pilot, he seemed a little OP. Felt a few of the characters had some plot armor. Yada yada. Another little thing I had was that the sets. I know everything went practical, right? Well, not everything, but a lot of it went more practical. I feel like some of the sets, right? I don't know. This might just be me, but looking at it, it felt like it was a set. I know you have the cool background, and it's real and everything, but it just kind of felt like enclosed, kind of. and not everywhere, but it just kind of felt like you were watching it on a set. And yeah, it's better than seeing a bunch of CGI, just crap everywhere. But I felt like I was watching a set, and it seemed little like, okay, I just don't want to distract me. And then sometimes the larger scenes with the CGI, maybe not many, but I think maybe one was like when they see the base and they're outside with Han Solo and Chewbacca and Finn. It seems like, I thought the CGI would be a tiny bit better, but whatever. And a lot of the explosions, the practical effects, they all kind of looked the same. It was like the same like spark explosion, and I saw it like a bunch of times, and I was like, huh, that that's a little like, it's kind of like, oh, it's cool to see it the first time, but after you see it, like, every time a lightsaber gets swung or a blast gets deflected or something, I don't know, it hits like a rock. It just kind of like seemed like the same explosion, and I was kind of like, huh, yeah, that, it's fine, not a big complaint. I like the way they're going. The aliens look really cool, all the new species, and I know they're using real costumes. I really appreciate that, the Millennium Falcon, at least the cockpit was real and stuff like that. Just really well done, in some of the scenes. But yeah, I think honestly that's mostly. I'm sorry, I know it's a long video, too long, didn't watch. I'll leave some annotations some annotations about like where certain things are, like where I talk about certain topics, so you can kind of jump around the video, whatever you think interests you and stuff like that. But overall, like, I don't, like I said again in the beginning, I don't want this to deter anybody from seeing the film. I love the film. I love, maybe not love, but like, I really enjoyed the film. It's a great time. Everybody should see it. I hope it makes, the $3 billion it deserves. And I think the new series of films are going to be even better than this. I think they just set up a really great universe. Yes, I had problems with it, and honestly, yeah, these problems kind of like, it really, like, especially like stuff like this destroying Star Killer base, the fights, it really, as a big fan, it really kind of deterred me from scenes. It really took me out of the experience, and I thought some of it could have been done better. I really think the movie was good, not amazing, great. If I would put, episodes 4 and 5 at that like 9.5 to 10 range, I'd honestly put this at that like 8 range. Which, great. It's a great, good movie. If another movie got that, brilliant. But for a Star Wars film, a movie I've been waiting for so long, I can't help but feel slightly disappointed. Because, yeah, even some things, like a lot of people are calling it, A New Hope 2.0, which, I guess, yeah, they recycle a lot of the same plot points. And a lot of these kind of problems, like, stick out to me, and it probably sticks out to a lot of other people. I've been seeing kind of similar complaints online and forums and stuff like that. Overall, everybody like really enjoyed it, but they still had things that bothered them. And I think Kylo Ren not being the best character he could have been, some of the things he did were kind of lame, and some, him being weak and not as strong as you want him to be. Star Killer base getting destroyed like that, like, oh, okay, just something, some things like that really didn't let the movie be as amazing as it could have been. A lot of things I think could have been done better. Did J.J. Abrams do a great job? Yeah. He made the third best movie in the franchise. It is a good movie. We're not worried anymore, that they're going to be fine. They're going to make great movies. I'm going to see all of them at midnight premieres or, 7 p.m. premieres. I am. And I loved it. And I really liked the movie. I have mixed opinions with some of my friends. Most, everybody's like enjoyed it, but some are still like, yeah, kind of some of that was kind of not great, and I understand. Yeah, like, see the movie, tell me what you think. If you have any comments, I'm not trying to be rude or anything. I respect everybody's opinion, and hopefully you respect my opinion. I don't know. I'm just David. What do I know? But like, if you have other thoughts, please tell me in the comments. I really want to hear, kind of like their arguments against what I'm saying, and kind of like, I just like, I like having a discussion. If you loved the movie, great. If you thought everything was perfect, like 100% perfect, great. Like, I'm happy for you, and I really want people to enjoy this movie, and it's good. It's a really good movie, and yeah, I mean, leaving the theater, I was slightly disappointed. Some things just annoy me, and I was just like, oh, that wasn't as great as I wanted it to be. Maybe my expectations were too high. Maybe I was too hard on the movie. You know, uh, Rewatching it, seeing it again, maybe I'll think differently. But as of right now, I think it's a good movie. 7.5 to 8 range. Closer to that 8. Uh, some things that bothered me. But still really enjoyed it. Had a good time. Glad I went. It's it's just that I did feel a little disappointed leaving, and that's my major problem. Like I was really excited for this movie. You could ask anybody. For weeks I've just been like, one Star Wars coming out, one Star Wars coming out. I bought my tickets the minute it came out, but I didn't want to leave disappointed. Slightly did. I'm not gonna say I was left as devastated like episode one kind of devastated, or well, I saw one as a kid, so I guess I wasn't devastated. But not how like fans felt. I just felt leaving a little a little disappointed. It could have been better. And that's not what I want to feel. Especially, I'll be hard on it because it's a Star Wars movie and I love it, and I do have love for all of them. Even the prequels in a weird way. So, yeah. Those are just my final thoughts, And also, this is kind of like a thing I might start doing, start doing some videos, some web shows, or not web shows, just kind of reviews, thoughts, And if any of this kind of stuff interests you, feel free to subscribe. I know it's my first video, hopefully you enjoyed it. I know it's a lot of talking. I'll change it up. This is my first video, like I said. But if you feel, I'll be talking about, games, movies, TV shows, comics, anime, manga, anything within that realm. If you kind of like that, subscribe maybe, stick around, maybe like a video, check it out. If not, I understand. But thanks if you watched the whole thing. Even if you didn't, thanks for checking out the video, and hope you have a great day. Tell me how you think about the movie, and I hope I hope everybody enjoys the movie, and I really think you will. Just, few things here and there. All right. This is David signing out. Bye.